Hey guys, Hardware Hound here, and I am back with some more Hound advice. As you guys know, Hound advice is designed to be some short videos that give some really practical advice in spite of maybe not having the resources or the time to do full-on reviews. But that doesn't mean we don't have a lot of practical experience coming from either myself or people that I know. So we're going to go ahead and bring you some Hound advice based on the best computer case specifically around keeping things cool. If you want to keep your parts cool in your system, then you're going to want a good case to do that. The problem is there's a lot of hype that goes around. Oh, optimized airflow and this, that, and the other. And how do you know what case is going to be the best? How do you know what case is going to really help keep things cool? How much case do you really need depending on what you're doing? Well, we're going to look at a pretty good example here with this case here in my system, because this system's been in a lot of different cases and I have had some very interesting experiences with it. So first off, let's just talk about what I've got in my build. Right now you can see I've got right here two graphics cards. These are R9 290s. I have two of them. It's a VaporX cooler with Sapphire. I have two of these guys in Crossfire. Now, as you know, the R9 290s get really hot to begin with, but having two of them in Crossfire makes temperatures really hard to manage. So don't ask me why I'm crazy enough to do that. I just really love dual GPU setups. On top of that, I've got an Asus Sabertooth 990FX R2 motherboard, and in that is an 8350 overclocked to 4.6 gigahertz. So I am trying to run a lot of heat in this computer, and that heat needs to get out of there, because if it just sits in there, well, obviously that's not a good thing for your system. So I've had this in several different cases, and I've tried things that are supposed to have optimized airflow and various other things, and long story short, I started realizing that I don't think it's so much the case as much as the fans and how many fans you got and what you can do to get air in there and get it out. And so in doing some of my own personal builds and just moving them from case to case, I started realizing that a 200 millimeter fan seems to do exponentially more for your airflow than even just your 140s or your 120s. And so with all of that in mind, I finally said, it's time to put some numbers on it. And so I tested it out. So the case that I have for testing is the Thermaltake Core V71. And this has been a really good case. But here's what's interesting. I've got 6 total fans. Of course, I've got my 140 millimeter in the bottom and my 140 millimeter in the back. And then up top, there's 2 200 millimeter fans. And in the front, there's 2 200 millimeter fans. The front and the bottom blow into the case, while the top and the rear expel out. And so we got this nice little diagonal airflow going through the case. In order to control these fans at the speeds and sound levels that I want them to be at, I'm using the NZXT Grid Plus with CAM 3.0 software. CAM is really nice because it makes it very easy to completely turn off or turn up a fan, and you can even put things to temperatures in your system, whether you want it to run off of your CPU or your GPU. So using CAM, I was like, I can shut off fans entirely and test and then add more or change things as I go. So that's exactly what we did. So on top of that then, I decided that I'd use World of Warcraft as my testing game. World of Warcraft feels like a kind of average game for your typical GPU load, although it's more intensive since the Legion pre-patch has dropped. What I did is I ran 20-minute runs, and I would run through, I was running through Westfall area. I would take a Dead Mines run and just kind of clear that really easily. And then I'd just run through and go up to like Stranglethorn. So that way I'd get a good little bit of environment, a little bit of dungeon, mix it up between the two, but did that consistently each time to see how the temperature stacked out. So right off the bat, if we go to just one 140 millimeter fan on the bottom in the rear, I had this one on and this one on. All fans will run at full speed. You know, you can set fan curves yourself. So just to get a good idea, I just used 100% across the board. I turned all the other fans off and I measured my temperatures. So my GPU it averaged out at 83 degrees. My top one, my bottom one averaged out at 70. That's pretty hot. That's the R9 290s for you. They just run hot. But I also wanted to see how my board and my CPU did. Of course, Asus has a temperature monitor that kind of measures the socket and the VRMs. And then, of course, the AMD chip has its own little temperature sensor that measures the core temps. So my board was coming in at about 59 degrees on average, and my processor was 47.9 degrees average. So as you can see, that's getting pretty warm. And getting that warm, you know, we don't really like to see things get quite that high, but that's reasonable. And that's just with two 140 millimeter fans. I really wanted to see how much of a difference just bumping up to 200 millimeter fans were. So I turned off the 140s, and I only turned on my front 200 millimeter and my rear 200 millimeter. And so put those on full speed, ran the test again. Now my GPU 1 and my GPU 2 still came in at 83 and 70 respectively. But here's where it got interesting. My board, its temperature dropped to 54 degrees. So that was a 5-degree drop, that's pretty nice. My socket temp dropped to 44 degrees. Now you would think with a liquid cooling system that wouldn't make a much difference, but it did. So that's almost 4 degrees that dropped with just two 200 millimeter fans. So now it was like, all right, now it's time to really see what the airflow does. So we turned everything on full blast. I have the 140 in the bottom, 140 in the rear, the two 200s in the front, the two 200s in the back. Everything 100%. Now the GPU, 82 degrees, so we dropped 1 degree. Well, that's not a lot to write home about. GPU 2 dropped to 68. Well, 2 degrees is nice, but once again, not a huge deal. But here's where the temperatures really showed. My board temperature dropped to 49 from 54. That's another 5-degree drop. And if you go from the original 59, that's a 10-degree drop. That is looking really good. And 49, that is a great everyday use temperature. I really like that. My core temp on my processor, this one surprised me. Went from 44 with just two 200 millimeters all the way to 34.7. That was my average core temp on the processor. So that's a huge drop. Obviously, just from there, that's like a 10-degree drop, and then almost 13 degrees from the original two 140s. Now, some of that's having 200 millimeter fans to help pull some of that air through, but overall, here's the thing. No matter how you want to look at it, whether you're liquid cooling, whether you're tower cooling, no matter what you're doing, you need to get the heat out of your computer and into the air. No matter how you look at it, sooner or later, the heat goes into the air, which means the more airflow you have, then the cooler you're going to be able to keep things in your system. Of course, you don't want it to sound like a jet engine, so 200 millimeter fans really work great. Unless you like it to sound like a jet engine, then you're just weird. But that's okay. We'll forgive you. It's not your fault. Maybe? I don't know. Either way. So what's the best case? Well, let's talk about this Thermaltake Core V71. There's a few minor details in this case that do kind of bug me, but it's just things like not having good holes to route cables, and just some minor things that were just hard to work around. But once I got it all set, it's things that you don't ever touch again. Overall, I wanted a case that not only had 4 200 millimeter fans, top and bottom, as well as room for the extra 140s, but I really wanted a full side panel window. A lot of cases that are full towers will have those 200 millimeter fans, but one of them will be right here covering up your GPUs. Now, while that's nice because you're getting airflow directly to them, I wanted to be able to see these bad boys. I love my system. I love the way it looks. I made this system. I put it together. I want to see it. So having a full side panel was really important to me. And finding a case that would have 2 full 200 millimeter fans in the front was actually kind of hard to find. There is a couple others, but I think about the only other one I can think of off the top of my head was the Core X71, which is also a Thermaltake case, and it's a lot bigger and a lot more money. This guy is a perfect balance for everything that I had. Room for my dual GPUs, lots of airflow, as well as room for my 360 millimeter radiator, plus allowing me to ditch all the hard drive bays and CD drive bays because I don't need those things. As you see, I've got 2 solid state disks here. That's all I needed. I didn't need a ton of drive space. So this case easily fit the bill as the best case for keeping my stuff cool while showing it off nicely. So would I recommend it? Yes. If you want to do a crossfire setup, keep things cool, even if you just want to have lots of airflow and keep things cool, this is a good case. I did have to change out the fans for NZXTs because the Thermaltake's fans do not work well with fan controllers. LED lights wouldn't turn on. The fan controller couldn't recognize the speed. It was weird. So I had a lot of issues where when I switched it to the NZXT's 200mm ones, I was able to get my blue LEDs back because LEDs make your computer go faster, and I was able to control everything and not have any more issues. So there you have it. That's your Hound advice. Hope that helps out. Have any questions, feel free to throw those in the comments. Let me know what you think of this video, and I will catch you next time.